Hey everyone, we're back with another episode of Skirmish Supremacy, and apparently my co-host Nick's dog will not shut up in the background. That is totally fine. We're actually joined today by Nick Baran from, he's got his own game out called Broken Contract that, for lack of better terms, looks like a cross between a minis game, a skirmish game, and an RPG game, or a minis game, a board game, and an RPG game all wrapped up into one. So
that sounds about right.
Awesome. So, because of the fact we've got a Nick and a Nick, when I say Nick, we're going to be talking about Nick, the guest, and when I say co-host, I will be referring to Nick Bogart, my co-host, aka Stinky Whistleteats. So that Ren and Stimpy, follow along, damn it. So that's what we're going to end up doing for this tonight, just to make sure that we're all on the same page.
Okay.
So, all right then. So normally I don't let Nick talk or say too much, and when I say Nick, I mean my co-host, aka Stinky Whistleteats, and we're gonna just kind of start this off. Nick, Broken Contract.
Yes.
Tell us how you got it started. Let's start there.
Okay. So we're gonna go back to around 2012. And I'd started working with Hyacinth Games on their skirmish game Wreckage, and we were working along. At first, I was doing some painting for them, and then helping out with playtesting, and then they brought me on as a partner, and we were working on development together in order to try and get their Kickstarter out to their backers. And I realized that I still had a love for game design, and unfortunately, my relationship with one of the guys from Hyacinth Games was a former roommate of mine, and it wasn't a good roommate situation. And when we started working in on a game together, we started to butt heads a lot, and it just wasn't working out. So I ended up at my day job tearing my ACL, and I had all this time on my hands. And I just left Hyacinth Games, and I was like, what am I going to do? And I was encouraged by my brother to basically start working on my own game. And so I was like, okay, this seems like a good idea. And I had a lot of recovery time ahead of me, 6 months of recovery. So I went through my ACL surgery and sat down and busted out the initial rules to Broken Contract over the course of a month, along with the structure of the background and what I wanted to do long term, and that was how it all kind of came together.
Okay, cool. So tell us a little bit about the setting of Broken Contract. From everything I've seen so far, it looks very dystopian, kind of, I don't want to say so much post-APOC, because it looks like civilization's still a thing.
Yes.
It very much has like that dystopian, somewhat Mad Max vibe with a bit of a Wild West twist.
Yeah. That is a really good analysis. A good reference point would be the Janestown episode of Firefly, if you are familiar enough with Firefly to know what I'm talking about.
Mutter's Milk.
Mutter's Milk, exactly. Yeah, the Mutters were indentured servants that were making mud for a corporation, and were basically slaves, and were had their hero of Janestown being Jane Cobb. Now, another good reference point would be to take like the movie Cool Hand Luke and just stick it into space. That would be a good reference point as well. But really, the basis of it came from, of all things, a documentary I had seen on the textile industry in Saipan, and this idea that they were bringing people over to Saipan with the promises of a better life somewhere else, and essentially were charging them for all of their all of their lodging, the trip over from China to Saipan, and all of these other things. And at the end of the day, these people that were working in the textile industry there were making no money. Their whole idea of having money to send back home to their families, none of it, it was all a lie. And it was a fascinating real-life thing that I felt was a good basis for a setting. And so, coming out of working on a post-apocalyptic game, I wanted to do something in that vein without being like Wreckage, because I'd been working on Wreckage. It was totally post-apocalyptic, and here was this mind frame that I was in, and I wanted to break away from that and have something that was engaging and would, I guess, draw people in because it was gritty and real, and that was where I went.
Nice. So you got all this from a documentary.
A lot of it started from there. There was also a great book by Naomi Klein called No Logo that talked a lot about sweatshop labor, which is really fascinating real life stuff. We don't want to. I know you said you don't want to get political, so we won't go into too much detail about that. But there's a lot of messed stuff that goes on in the world.
Yeah, and so stuff like that, I say I don't want to get too political on it, but when it comes time to something like that where it provides context for your game, it makes perfect sense. At that point, it's kind of like, you're sending a message, but you're drawing a lot of that, what a lot of gamers see as grittiness from like real life experience of like people literally just being handed a shit sandwich and expected to eat it.
Exactly.
Cool. So tell us a little bit about the setting of Broken Contract. I mean, we kind of hinted at it a little bit, but tell us about the background, how you developed it, if there was any tweaks, things of that nature.
So the original root story that I had come up with was this idea, because I knew that I wanted it to be kind of Wild West-ish, and so I had this idea of the breakers being these sweatshop laborers, these indentured servants, these slaves that were on the run, and them being hunted by enforcers that enforced the contracts that they had signed away their lives to. And so I had this root idea of these essentially bounty hunters chasing after escaped indentured servants. And I needed to have a root point, because in order for there to be these indentured servants, there had to be, the setting in which they came from. And so I basically built up the idea of these mines, the Farum Sky mines. And the Farum Sky mines are on a distant planet that had been colonized after Earth had been, left in waste. And so you've got these corporations setting up these various industries. And so I focused in on this Farum Sky mine because one of the things that you run into with RPGs is that there's always so much of a scope. You have this entire world to build, this entire setting, and I wanted to just zero in on one thing. This is my starting point. And so with all these crazy ideas floating around in my head, I essentially went in to this mine setting and just focused on that. So you have two major players in the Farum Sky mines. You have the Black Squadron Security, which is a security firm that keeps the workers working. They're there in order to make sure that the miners get their quotas done, and at the end of the day are back in their barracks compounds and ready to start their next day and work through and make their quotas. And then the opposite end of the spectrum is this idea of these workers who have had enough. They can't stand their existence anymore, and they'd rather take a bullet in the back than work another day in servitude to these harsh masters. And so the two principal factions are the Black Squadron security, and the Breakers.
Okay, cool. So between the Black Squadron and the Breakers, like, I was kind of looking at it a little bit. So Black Squadron is very much, they kind of have like your Wild West, I guess, prison guard kind of feel.
Yes.
Like, if you're working out in like the middle of Arizona and like you were out there, serving time, like they don't look like your typical security force that you would see in a mine. They look more like somebody that you would see guarding a jail.
Correct.
Nice. So I wasn't wrong.
That actually is when I originally sent the first bit of art to an artist, or my ideas to an artist. I actually sent them references from Cool Hand Luke, because in Cool Hand Luke it is that exact Arizona, New Mexico type of prison setting, and you've got these workers all essentially digging ditches with a bunch of guys with cowboy hats and sunglasses watching over them. So we just kind of made them look a little more fascist and a little more sci-fi, but essentially that was the root imagery that we were drawing from.
Okay, cool. And the Breakers themselves, I noticed for the most part they look just like normal people. However, you have one guy that is just freaking enormous.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, the enormous guy, and there's actually one for currently a model on each side for each faction that is enormous. And they are gen mods. Essentially, in the future, in this setting, you've got these colony ships that are traveling to different planets, terraforming them and colonizing them in order to extract the resources and turn a profit. And it is humanity, in a sense, is a limitless resource because you can constantly propagate. And so the idea is that rather than bring a bunch of huge, costly machines across space, they instead would get to a planet, colonize the planet, and then use gene modification in order to essentially turn a portion of the populace into basically living machines. And so the Gen Mod Trest that you've seen images of is actually a human machine. He's basically a piece of construction equipment that is made of flesh.
Nice. So they basically took a dude and turned him into a walking pork truck.
Yes.
Gotcha. Okay, that makes a little bit more sense. Because I just noticed that out of everything, there's this one guy that was just enormous.
Yes.
It's like, okay, yeah, clearly he's eating everybody else's food is what's going on in the mine. So, okay, cool. So that answers that. So you have a full world that goes outside of Broken Contract, but Broken Contract itself is focusing on this one little plot in
Correct.
Your overall story. Okay, cool. So what made you decide to take the game in the direction it's in now, where it's not like a full-blown miniatures game? You didn't make like a full-on RPG setting, but you kind of have this hybrid of a board game skirmish RPG. Yeah.
Yeah. Essentially, there's a number of different reasons that drew me in that direction. One is that RPGs have I actually just recently started playing D&D again, but there is so much time that goes into development and setup just to run an adventure, and that seemed way too. It puts too much effort, I guess, on the players to actually carry it out, and so a lot of casual gamers prefer things like dungeon crawlers and board games and things of that nature. I also am absolutely in love with miniature games myself. So I actually have been, I worked for Games Workshop for a number of years. I fell in love with Games Workshop's games because of Necromunda. Most more than any of their other games, because it had this element of it that was able to appeal to my RPG interests, but with that really quick setup time, where you could just throw a bunch of stuff on the table and play. And at the same time, it had a grittiness that you would get from RPGs, in that in an RPG, somebody could get set on fire, and in Necromunda, somebody could get set on fire, and they would run randomly all over the board. And it was, when a character in Necromunda got set on fire, it was, kind of hysterical, because they're just running around all over the place, and it was a memorable moment. It was one of those moments that they refer to as water cooler moments. Those moments that you're going to remember for years and years. Potentially, because of the fact that it just was off the wall, and it just sort of happened. And so I wanted to have those types of elements in a game, but I also wanted to reduce that barrier of entry. And so you look at current games like X-Wing or Zombicide or I don't know, something like Shadows of Brimstone, and you've got all of these games that have miniatures, and they draw that interest that comes with having a bunch of miniatures on the table. They have a level of being, I guess, of simplicity. They're games that allow you to just jump in and play even easier than a game like Necromunda. And so I needed to reduce that barrier of entry, but still have those wild and crazy moments that you get out of an RPG. And so I blended all of these things into what I think distills down into something where you can have board game type sections where you throw those down on the table, you throw your models down on the table, you've got a scenario that you read off of a single page, and boom, you're off and running. And so it has that narrative that can come that you want out of an RPG, but at the same time distills down into this very simple board game type of format.
Okay, cool. So you definitely wanted to do something a little bit more streamlined, and I guess something a little. I was talking to Nick about this earlier, actually. Something that's more for the muggles, the people that aren't your hardcore gamers. Something that's a little bit more pick up and play friendly. Yeah,
that is a huge thing right now. Like even Age of Sigmar only has 4 pages of rules or something like that. The idea is you want to have something that reduces that barrier to entry, but at the same time gives somebody an immersive play experience. And so rather than focus in on having people have to build all their scenery and be immersed in the hobby aspect of it, I want people to be able to stumble into the hobby aspect while still being able to just throw down a couple of board sections, some board game tiles like Zombicide, and be able to play a game and be able to focus on, oh wow, I can pick up my opponent and throw them across the board and set them on fire and drug them and poison them and do all sorts of ridiculous things. Do a dive roll under a closing door and all of that good stuff with basically have an action movie on a board game type setting.
Nice. Yeah, it definitely makes sense. I mean, a lot of games are moving in that, I don't want to call them simplistic, but much more streamlined direction. Yes. So it's good that you're kind of sticking to the trend on that. It's and recognizing it. So it definitely helps lead towards a little bit more success in trying to reach out to stores, especially in today's market. But that's a little bit too much corporate talk. Yeah. So tell us a little bit about how the game plays.
Okay.
So, let's say we were to start a game. Walk us through, do we choose a scenario? How do we choose sides?
Okay.
How many players?
Yeah. one of the things that's different about Broken Contract than other skirmish games is it's actually encouraged that you play more than 2 players. You can have a perfectly enjoyable 2-player game, but the narrative actually has more of an impact if you're playing with multiple players. Usually a person, controlling like 2 or 3 characters per person, or even a single character per person. We've played Broken Contract with 8 people playing at once, and each person playing 1 or 2 characters. So it really plays well in that type of environment because of the fact that you have such flexibility in what you're doing. The game itself uses a point system, so it's familiar in that regard, but it's a very simple point system. You can not just create your force, or as I refer to it as your crew. You can. What was that? So, anyways, you can create your crew, but you can also create your individual characters, and so this allows you to really personalize the characters that you're using in the game. And one of the things that's very different about Broken Contract from other skirmish games is that you can actually you knock a character prone or kill them, take them out of action. You can pilfer their equipment, and so then add it onto your character and use it to make your character better, or swap out the weapon that you've got in hand. So it's similar to, I guess, something like a first-person shooter in the sense that you can constantly upgrade in gameplay. So to start a game, you pick out a mission, you pick out your crew, you break up the points based upon how many people are playing, and then you sit down and you go through the setup just like you would in a scenario in any other game system. And so you set up your models, and then you use an action point system, which is something that most of us are familiar with. In Broken Contract, most characters have 3 actions. And the thing that makes it a little bit different, there's actually 2 things that make it a little bit different. One is that there is a really kind of in-depth selection of actions. It's not overwhelming, but you are spoiled for choice. You can do things, like I said, take a weapon off of a character that's down. You can grapple. You can apply restraints. Because one of the big things with the Black Squadron security, most of the scenarios, they get victory points for actually restraining characters, the breaker characters. So that's an important thing that takes place in the game. So there's a multitude of other actions that go beyond just shooting and hand-to-hand combat and moving. Then beyond that, there is an initiative system that is kind of unlike any other game system that I can think of, except for Wild in the Streets, who you just talked to Chris last week or last episode. The initiative system in Broken Contract is actually card-driven, because when I was developing Broken Contract, I tried a million different dice systems in order to try and get a unique initiative position for each of the characters, and then I was like, this is stupid. Rather than rolling dice and having roll-offs and roll-offs and roll-offs and roll-offs, it just made more sense to have a deck of cards numbered from 1 to however many characters are on the table, and then deal out a card to each of the characters, and that's the initiative order that they go in. And so this creates an alternating initiative order that changes every single turn, so you never know when a character is going to go until the start of the turn.
Gotcha. So in a way, it makes it it makes it chaotic, but at the same time, you have to still somewhat plan ahead for what's going to happen really for each individual character.
Exactly.
I also like the fact that because you said you get to look at the cards once you get them, right?
Yes.
So you can, even at the beginning of your turn, you can start strategizing a little bit. So-and-so's going to go, and, these people are going to go, so this is what they can do.
Yes. Yeah, and the other thing is that there are actions and there are interruptions. So if your character is, let's say you draw the first initiative card, you can, if you see a circumstance where you want to be in a better position to defend yourself or whatever, you can save action points to use towards interruptions. So that way you're never necessarily left in a lurch. But there's a slight gamble to it because you could save your action points for interruptions and then your opponent ignores your character and then you don't get to use your interruptions. So there's this constant give and take.
All right. That's pretty cool. I'm sorry. Tim had to step away for a second.
Yep.
And my kids were loud, so. All right. So, give and take. You said more than 2 players. Is optimal for playing the game.
Yeah, it's one of those things where when you're playing a skirmish game, we'll talk about Necromunda or something like Wild West Exodus or a game like that, because you've got one person playing their faction, their crew, their army, and the other person playing theirs. The individuality of the different characters gets lost, and so you kind of lose a certain level of personality that goes with each of the characters that you've created. So by playing with multiple players, you actually inject a certain level of personality into the characters that you're playing, and it makes the game more dynamic and more diverse. You could be playing on the same side, and particularly one of the things that's figures in Broken Contract is that all of the breakers are not necessarily have the same intentions. There are breakers that have the keyword progen, which is a progenitor character that is somebody that was part of the original wave of colonists on the planet Hathor, where the Farum Sky mines are placed. So you've got characters that have their own agendas. There are criminals, because there's going to be a criminal element that takes place within the mines, because whenever you've got people that are strictly controlled, there are going to be those that are going to buck the system in order to try and get contraband, drugs, stolen rations, what have you. There's always going to be somebody that's trying to take advantage of the environment. And so within Broken Contract, and within the Breakers or even the Black Squadron Security, there are going to be those characters that have I guess, motivations that go beyond just the scenario, I guess you could say. So in that sense, by having these keywords that go along with different characters, different scenarios can then have objectives that are specific to those characters and to those keywords, creating an element where you can have 2 people that are playing as breakers, and one person is trying to achieve the core objectives that all the breakers are trying to achieve, and then you can have one person who is playing the criminals or the progens, and they are breakers. They are trying to get past Black Squadron Security, but they might be trying to achieve an objective that is different than the rest of the breakers. So you can have this element where the characters take on additional personality because they're they're working together, but also trying to achieve things that are different from one another.
Right. So it kind of creates a game within a game.
Correct.
Awesome. Yeah, that definitely adds another layer of depth and challenge too. So I know that you've mentioned that it can be played with multiple people. What do you feel is like the ideal maximum amount of players that can be that can participate without it dragging on too much?
Yeah, at 8 players, because we've played up to 8 players. At 8 players, it bogs down. But really, anywhere from 2 to like 6 players, it can still go at a good pace. Because a lot of people at Adepticon described it to me as a micro skirmish game, because really the sweet spot is 3 to 5 models per side, or 3 to 6 models per side. And so when you've got 8 models on the table, no more than like 10 models on the table, you can split that up pretty well between 2 to 6 people, and each character is only getting three actions per character, so it doesn't slow it down too much. It's not like really when I think of like the standard 2,000 point game of 40K, to me that is a game that is bogged down. I have to sit there and wait 20 minutes for my opponent to complete their turn, unless it's one of these tournament guys that's so amped up on it that they're like shaking while they're playing because they're trying to get their orcs across the table as fast as they possibly can. If you're not playing with a person like that, you're basically kind of sitting and spectating for these great lengths of time. Whereas with Broken Contract, especially with this action and interruption system, you're really, even with 6 people, you're jumping from person to person to person very rapidly, and so it moves along.
Right,
Awesome.
Especially when you have that like alternating and kind of that random but still somewhat planned initiative set up.
Yeah.
Like you're never really out of the action.
Correct.
Yeah, and I definitely like that a lot more. That not to kick 40K in the dick at all, because I know that it's still the most popular game on the planet. But that is one of the things that bogs me down, is when I feel that in the middle of a war game where I'm supposed to be paying attention to what my opponent is doing, so that way I can lessen my losses and try to win the game. The moment that I feel that I should be able to I can pull out my cell phone and Facebook or something along those lines, like I'm immediately removed from the game.
Yeah. Yeah, and for me, like I was running a event at Adepticon a couple of years in a row before I moved over to doing my own game, and so just didn't have the time to run this event at Adepticon anymore. It was a 40K tournament that was based around 1,000 points. Had a sidebar, and you had this constantly changing each game you played on a different table. And the reason why I did an event like that was because of the fact that I wanted to be able to have people come and their turns went by rapidly, they got a constantly different experience, and they were engaged instead of falling asleep at their table, especially if they got a bad matchup. And so for me, it was really imperative when I developed my own game was to have this constant engagement, so people aren't just sitting and waiting for the next thing to happen. So
yeah, and that definitely changes the dynamic of any game.
Yeah. And I'm going on record. For me, 40K, the sweet spot is between 1,000 and 1,500 points. Anything over that, and it's just too much. But that's me.
It's funny you mentioned that, not to get off topic, but I played a couple of games of Age of Sigmar this last weekend, and even though they just added points into the game, and I know the rules are streamlined and yada yada, the fact that it's like I still got to move 80 different models across the table, and they all have I have to roll to run. I have to roll to charge. It's like you roll to do everything, and I was just like, into turn 2, I checked out.
Yeah.
Love the models. I love the concept of everything that they're doing with Age of Sigmar. The game itself, I'm still like, oh, Jesus Christ, why did I do it?
Oh, I'm so glad I only bought the starter box.
You shut your filthy mouth.
I honestly still haven't played Age of Sigmar, but I'm still curious about it. It's something that I'd like to try. One of the disadvantages of having moved to Milwaukee is that I had to find a whole new circle of people to game with, and so I guess I haven't played a game of 40K since I moved to Milwaukee. So that kind of gives you a sense of it's not that there's not 40K players here. There's plenty of them. It's just that living in the city and the people that I game with are mostly board gamers and people that play, smaller skirmish games, and that's about it.
Right.
Then you're in with a good crowd. Trust me on that. I won't say the names coming from Milwaukee, but you're in a good crowd.
Very good.
We'll leave it at that. Nice. So you did a Kickstarter for Broken Contract. Obviously, that's how most games get started nowadays.
Yep.
Unless you're going to go straight ballsy and fund it out of your own pocket, which almost never happens. How long ago did you end up finishing up?
Okay. So the Kickstarter ended in April of last year. So not this past April, but the year before that. And it was a successful Kickstarter, but all the whole goal of the Kickstarter was just to get the two factions out. Right. So all that Kickstarter did was allow me to get the Breakers and a selection of models for the Breakers and the Black Squadron Security. And part of the reason why I did it that way was, one, I had actually previously tried to do a Kickstarter the year before that. And the Kickstarter was, I can't remember if it was set for $20,000 or $24,000. It was, trying to put it out in like a board game format. I also didn't know as much about Kickstarter back then, and so I went in and I was like, "This is, I need to make this happen. This is the amount of money that I need in order to do this, and let's see what happens." And of course, within 2 weeks, I took the Kickstarter down and was, heartbroken and shattered, because that's how these things go, especially when it's a passion project, something that means so much to you. But the thing that I learned from it is that, especially with approaching the game industry from being in the position of being the new guy on the block, the completely untested and no history that the world around you knows. Unfortunately, people, obviously don't want to take a chance, especially with the amount of Kickstarters that have failed to produce goods, especially ones that were run by people that seemed, legit. So here I am. I'm running this $20,000 Kickstarter, and there are people that are interested, but people aren't taking the bait, and I totally understand. I felt I've been in that exact position looking at other Kickstarters, but at the same time, I knew what I needed, and I couldn't settle for less. And it failed. So I regrouped, and I was like, okay, so the majority of my investment so far, financial investment, has gone into these models. And so looking at, I don't know if you've ever looked at, there's Stonemeyer Games has done a huge, over 100 different articles on running game-related Kickstarters. And one of the things that they focused on in a number of their articles was something called the minimum viable product. And so after looking at this idea of minimum viable product, if I distill what I'm working on down to its components, what is the thing that I have invested the most money into that is something that is saleable, even if people don't play the game? And that is the models. There are going to be some people that want the models for their post-apocalyptic game, or this game or that game. For example, one of the guys that is painting up a bunch of Black Squadron Security right now this guy who does Worlds in Conflict blog, Jay Griffiths, he's painting up my Black Squadron security in order to use them not just in Broken Contract, but also to use them in This Is Not a Test. And I think that's fantastic. And that is part of the reason why I did this Kickstarter last year, was to get those models out to the world so that people can get their first taste of the Broken Contract setting, and at the same time have something that they can paint up or play with in another game system or whatever, and I can recoup some of the investment that I've put in order to do more development. And so the Kickstarter raised a little over $4,000. I got all the models done. I also used that money in order to produce the cards that each of the models uses in the game, because in Broken Contract there are character cards to keep track of your stats. There are equipment cards so that when you're playing the game, you have all of the important information for the equipment that you're using right in front of you. And if your character steals equipment off another character, you just take the card and you put it on your dashboard. So that way you can constantly have that stuff in front of you. And so the ultimate thing that I accomplished with that Kickstarter was to get those models out, but also all of the cards needed to play with those models in Broken Contract once the rules are out. There is a PDF of the playtest rules that has been constantly updated over the last 2 years of development, but the finalized concrete rule book is not out yet, and that is something that is going to be the next Kickstarter that I am pushing towards.
Nice. And when could we expect to see that one go live?
Hopefully, my goal was to shoot for August, September. So this month or next month is hopefully the target. I've got the current edition of the rulebook, the current beta, is being, I guess, cobbled together right now. I actually have the last edition of the rules, and since the last edition of the rules, I added a new, better character creation system, better crew creation system, added campaign rules, some new scenarios, and so all of that stuff is being added in. Needs to go through editing and all of that good stuff. So as soon as I have that complete, it will go to my graphic design guy, Sam Alcaraz, and he will get it all laid out, and we'll send it for copy editing. So that's where that's at. So things should happen pretty rapidly now.
Yeah, definitely keep us up to date on that too, because I'm quite certain that a lot of the listeners that we have would want to know exactly when that's going to pop up. So,
Very good.
Definitely make sure that even on the Skirmish Supremacy page, if you need to send us info or you want to post it yourself, go ahead and do it.
All right, sounds good.
Cool. So we've covered how the game plays. We've covered the world itself. We've covered a little bit about your background. I know you said that you used to work for Games Workshop.
Yes.
I know we talk a lot about skirmish games, but people still are very interested in how the big boy in the industry acts. So tell us a little bit about your time and some of the stuff that you noticed while you were working there.
Okay. Yeah, well, Games Workshop gave me a fantastic education. And I know a lot of people complain about Games Workshop and have a lot of terrible things to say about their business practices and XYZ, their rules development, yada yada, and even their retail sales techniques. As somebody that worked in Games Workshop retail, and before I worked in Games Workshop retail, I owned my own gaming store, and it was one of those things where I thought I knew everything when I walked into working for Games Workshop, and then realized that I was an idiot and didn't know anything about anything having to do with selling games. It was, as I said, a fantastic education, because Games Workshop, for all of their frustrations that they cause people, they are somewhat meticulous in how they approach things. Like, as far as like any other company that I have worked for, Games Workshop, unlike any other company, they immediately, once I started working for them, they flew me to Baltimore in order to get me training. They then flew me out when I was going to be the assistant manager of the store. They flew me out again in order to give me more training. They flew me out again to Baltimore when I became a manager for Games Workshop. They were constantly doing managers meetings and managers conferences, and were constantly, I guess, engaged in trying to make us the best that we could be, and to think about how we handled retail and selling games. And one of the big things that they really understood was how to sell their own games, because as I mentioned in one of our little asides before we started the interview, is that when I worked for Games Workshop, their approach was to use the retail chain as their marketing, and this was something that actually worked out fantastically, because somebody comes into a Games Workshop store, and yeah, I know the red shirts, they're all up in your grill, and they're asking you about stuff, and it can be off-putting. But when you're a 12-year-old kid, and you walk into that store, and you see all these, Space Marines and dragons and wood elves and all this stuff in front of you, and your eyes are popping out of your head, and this guy comes up, or this guy or girl comes up and starts talking to you about the worlds of Games Workshop, it goes from being something that you're looking at to something that you are now quickly becoming a part of. And the more they engage you, and that moment of getting you into the demo game, getting through the demo game, being pumped on what you just did, them taking the core box and dropping it into your hands and feeling the weight. There was so much to how they handled their sales that it's unlike any other way of, because a lot of us now, people buy stuff online. If I tell you, somebody that's listening to Skirmish Supremacy podcast right now, they might hear me talking about Broken Contract, and they might think, this sounds really cool. I think this is a game that I'm going to look into, and they'll poke around on my blog, and they'll poke around on my Facebook page, and it might suck them in, it might not. When you actually play the game, you're hearing the stuff firsthand. The models are in your hand. Somebody has set them in your hand. It is way harder to resist, because you have everything at your fingertips. You've got somebody to answer the questions. You've got the models in hand. Everything is right there. And Games Workshop knew this. And this is how they brought so many people into the world of miniature wargaming. And I think that even with the incredible IP of Star Wars, games like X-Wing and Imperial Assault, they would sell well, but I think that Games Workshop really paved the way for a lot of these other games, because of the fact that they've already indoctrinated many people into the idea of playing a miniatures game. And I think that is something that Games Workshop just did fantastically well.
Yeah, there's a lot to be said, and as much as we've talked about supporting your local stores and whatnot, there's a lot to be said about the fact that when you look at something online, you're looking at it and you're saying, yeah, that would be cool. But the moment that somebody is interacting with you, telling you how cool it is, and physically putting that product in your hand. Like, it pretty much takes away any notion of no that you would have.
Yeah.
Like, I'm going to purchase this. Because now they're, like, staring right at you going, are you going to walk to the register now? So.
Yeah, well, but it's one of those things, because, I mean, as somebody that did it for 3 years, there was that, there were plenty of people that said no, but there were those people, if it grabbed them, if it was one of those things where they had the disposable income and they were looking at it and their eyes were popping out of their heads and they had it in their hands, they would ask their questions, you would be able to answer them because you're knowledgeable on the product, and then they would walk away with it. And it was an ace way of handling things, and now with Broken Contract, I can see it. There are a lot of people that look at the Facebook page and look at my store NV, which is my online store, and they look at, and there's traffic, but it's nothing like when I was at Adepticon and with my Games Workshop training and having 2 other people that were helping me out at Adepticon who also were former employees of Games Workshop that had worked for me. It's like people would walk away and they were amped on Broken Contract. And, a lot of that comes from actually engaging with it, playing it, seeing it, holding it. And that is something that the internet cannot do. The one thing that it can do, podcasts are a great way of hyping things that you're excited about and getting other people excited about. But one of the things that I think has been a fantastic development as well are vlogs like Guerrilla Miniature Games on YouTube. It's like it is the closest you're going to get to having that experience of playing a game on the internet. So
yes, that's very true. That's actually, it's funny you mentioned that, because that's something that Nick and I were actually talking about a little bit, a while back, and something that we're going to try to start doing since, I just started putting everything out on YouTube as well. But
yeah,
it takes a little bit of time.
Yeah. Oh yeah. It's funny because I know this, and I feel very strongly about that. Yet I haven't created my own Broken Contract YouTube content. Part of it because of having my hands in too many projects, but also a sense of being camera shy and what have you. When I was making the videos for the Broken Contract Kickstarter, I made so many videos that were not used because of my let's say I'm saying a lot, or there's all of these elements, seeing my face and thinking, wow, I look kind of stupid. There's all these barriers that prevent you from going the video route. But in all honesty, it's like it's something that I know that I personally need to pursue more of in order to get more people interested and more people engaged, because obviously I can't go to 100 conventions a year or anything like that. It's like Gen Con is this weekend, and it was just out of my budget. It was just something that I couldn't do. And so I was actually, Chris Kohler from Wild in the Streets just asked me today about maybe sharing a booth next year, in order to make it more affordable for guys like us who have these small game companies that have zero budget to work with.
Right, and it makes total sense to do that, especially with the whole Gen Con priority thing. But we could go on and on and on about how that screws a little guy. We just won't. So yeah, we only got a couple minutes left of this. We try to keep it within the hour, but I know that we could end up talking and talking and talking.
Yeah, I think you've picked up on. I can go.
Hey, that's totally fine. You're like the perfect guest for us on that, because the fact that we try to, especially when we're talking about your products, we try to let you drive the excitement. Nick and I could sit back and talk about it, but it's better when people hear it from you.
Indeed.
So, that is definitely a big thing. So, tell us, for the last couple of minutes, where can people find you? Plug any Twitter, Instagram, anything else you got?
Okay. So, there are a lot of ways to find me. So typing Broken Contract Game into Google is the quickest way to find me, because if you type Broken Contract Game into Google, you're going to find a bunch of different stuff. You're going to find the blog. I've got a game design blog where I've been documenting Broken Contract from the very beginning. There's posts that go back all the way to 3 years ago when I first started the project. You can see the early concept art if you click all the way back and be like, ugh, they've come a long way. But there's a lot of stuff that you can look at. One of the great things on the blog is that if you are somebody that likes to make terrain, one of my side loves is making terrain, and so I've done several series on how to make mine scenery for Broken Contract, and so that's something that's worth going back and digging through some of the old posts in order to look at. If you're into design philosophy, also finding out what new things I'm working on, all that stuff appears in the blog. But of course, the blog format is more picture and word heavy than looking at either the Instagram, the Twitter, or the YouTube, or not YouTube, the Facebook. Everything that I do during the week, I guess, anything that is photo worthy usually ends up either on Instagram or Facebook or both. So broken_contract is the Instagram. Facebook, just look for Broken Contract on Facebook and it'll pop up. And then Twitter, I've got a Broken Contract Twitter. It is just Broken Contract on Twitter, and that one gets the least love because Twitter is just kind of weird. I don't know. But those
I'm not a fan of Twitter either.
Yeah, it's
I let Nick do it all.
Some people love it. I just, it's never grabbed me. I don't know. So, but yeah, as we discussed, I've got plans for a Kickstarter for the current edition of the rules, or the upcoming edition of the rules in hard format. I shouldn't say hard copy or whatever, because it'll actually be a softcover book, but you know what I'm trying to say. And so there will be a Kickstarter for the rules. There will probably be some new models and what have you attached to that Kickstarter, depending on what type of money I raise. But I also want to do a quick plug. If you go to the Broken Contract Facebook or the design blog, you're going to start to see some stuff about a card game that my partner Lisa and I are working on called Troublemakers, which is a game about subcultural currency and trying to be the coolest of the cool. And so that is another project that you'll see a bunch of design blog posts about over the coming months, as well as we push towards getting that out and into the world.
Nice. So you are definitely all over the place, and you are definitely still going with much more than just Broken Contract. Like, you didn't say this is it and we're done, which is definitely
No, and I think that's an important thing. Broken Contract is my baby. It was the first game that I conceived and actually developed to a point of being able to bring to market. But the fact of the matter is that game companies, the best game companies, have a variety of products that are desirable to a diverse array of gamers, and not everybody wants to play a in-depth miniature game. Some people want to play a simple card game just to warm up before they jump into something a little heavier while they're waiting for the rest of their gamers to show up or what have you. And so I want to be able to have a diverse portfolio of games that people can draw from and enjoy.
Nice. Well, co-host Nick, is there anything else you'd like to throw in there before we head out for the night?
No, I just want to say, Nick, it's been great having another Nick on the show. It's made him actually be nice when he's saying Nick.
You know,
I'm not nice to this guy.
Yeah, it happens. But I just want to say thank you very much for having me on the show. I hope that I can do it again, because I really it is so important to small companies like mine, and others like Chris that Wild in the Streets that you interviewed. It is so important for the little guy to get the attention that podcasts like yours are drawing to their games and to their companies. I can't.
Thanks for listening to another episode of Skirmish Supremacy. To see more of the antics that Nick and I do, you can check us out on Facebook at Skirmish Supremacy. We also have Twitter, which we can be reached at Skirmish Supreme, because apparently Skirmish Supremacy does not fit in Twitter. And if you want to email us directly, you can reach us at tim@skirmishsupremacy.com or nick@skirmishsupremacy.com. Thanks for listening.